Good morning and welcome back to Gaming with ADHD, where today we are talking with Tom Mason, uh, a miniature sculptor. And of course, with all of our technical difficulties, it's taken me a while to get this all started. So, while we are waiting for Tom to arrive, uh, which will be here momentarily, uh, basically just want to remind everyone that we do have a Facebook page for Gaming with ADHD, and yeah, would absolutely love to have you all follow us over there. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to bring in Tom, and we're going to talk games and miniatures and whatever stupid tangents my brain decides to bring us on. So, with that said, Tom, good morning.
Hey,
How you doing?
doing well. Did you say good morning?
I did. That
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am fantastic. Outside of the fact that I've had maybe 3 hours of sleep, if I'm lucky. But yes, no, I am mildly distracted, trying to edit things so that I have correct links out everywhere. Anyways, sorry about that. Yeah, I when I started working nights, the manager for my team, he covered the afternoon evening shift and then the overnight people. And so whenever he came into the office, all he ever said was good morning. And it just kind of became the thing. And so it doesn't matter what time of day it is, that's how I say hi to everyone. And they all look at me funny, and it's fantastic. So anyways, so you are Tom Mason. Who's Tom Mason?
I'm many things, but as it pertains to this, I'm a miniature sculptor. I was one of the two original people who started Mercs before it blew up into the mega game that it was when Keith and Brian took it even farther, and Kenny. And but I've sculpted for all sorts of miniature companies throughout the years, and I have my own line, Effigy Miniatures. And I do a YouTube show called the Mini Sculpting Super Show, where I talk and share about sculpting miniatures and working in the miniatures industry.
Fantastic. All right. So, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Michigan, actually, just north of Detroit. Still, I guess I don't call it home anymore. For years and years and years, I lived there until I was 14. Then I moved down to Indiana, near Lafayette, and spent my high school years there. Went to college around Indiana, and I basically bounced around this state ever since. So I'm currently down near Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
But still in Indiana.
But still in Indiana. No, I have a friend in Louisville, and he talks about having to go across border all the time. So doesn't surprise me. All right. So what is your background in gaming? What got you into the hobby as opposed to a typical American boy of football and baseball and all of those other sports ball things?
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously an artist, and that's always been a huge part of what I've loved doing and practiced my whole life. And so I need to go back. I used to think I had this down really pat as far as the years. I distinctly remember when I turned 13 getting like my first Space Marine Terminator miniature, and I might have gotten a few miniatures before then. But that's what always...
Just one Terminator, not a whole squad?
Even back... No, one. It was in the blister pack. It was with the lightning claws.
Oh yeah.
Back when you could buy them individually, and that's basically. It's actually funny that we touched on that because through my whole life, I've always struggled to like just buy a big army. I'm like, oh, I like this one. I like this one. I'm just buying one at a time. And so I could never buy a big army at once. You know, you eventually accumulate enough, but I'm sure I spent more money over time than if I would have just saved for a little bit to buy a big army. But that's what really got me into it. So at about age of 13, I if anybody is from Michigan and is familiar with a hobby store called Ryder Hobbies, that was my first gaming hobby store. And this is actually how I got into it. So I had a friend, really good friend. I still have a good friend. We still hang out. We just saw each other 2 months ago. Anyways, but he and his brother, they would play a lot of role-playing games. They had Hero Quest, and we played that at his house once, and I got my own copy later. And I remember seeing in there, and then I think there were some computer games that had these pamphlets that Games Workshop used to put in that would try and entice you about all their wider miniature gaming things. And that's, I still don't remember how. I think we must have just started to look up hobby shops in the area, and that's when we found Ryder. And I remember going there all the time. I would go there multiple times a week sometimes. One time I went there every single day and bought a Rail Partha D&D miniature every single day because I had to buy something.
I'm the same way when I go in a game store.
Yeah. And I don't remember, one of the workers who was a great, kind of just took me under his wing. And as a young boy, taught me a lot about miniatures. He was so generous, but he was like, man, do you work here? Because we were always coming in. But yeah, I just totally fell in love with it and had a really great, it had this one just aisle that was packed full of miniatures and games and all sorts of different things, heavy gear, Battletech, 40K, Warhammer, obviously all the Rail Partha D&D, and then tons of role-playing books. And I just got totally lost and committed to it. So that's how I got started in that, if that answers that question.
It does. So what are some of the earlier games that you would play? So you mentioned Hero Quest. What else?
Well, actually, it's funny because I believe I actually had Battletech before I even played Hero Quest. I remember, but I didn't play it for years. We went, there was this little hobby store down where we ended up moving in Indiana. There's this little hobby store. It was mostly crafts and stuff, but for whatever reason, they had a few game things, and they had a copy of Battletech, the box set with those, that first plastic set of miniatures. And I bought it, and we might have barely opened it. But I was a terrible reader as a kid. And so, seeing a rule book like that, as much as I wanted to play it, was too much. And so it took me years to get up the courage to start to read it and try and figure it out. But I had that. So, but once I did, like, that was our game, probably even before and more than 40K for a long time. But yeah, so the initial one would definitely have been Battletech. We did a lot of 40K, my young friend group, and Warhammer ended up, by the time I started to move down here, it turned more to Warhammer. I just was really getting into the fantasy side of things more than like sci-fi in every which way. And I go back and forth, but those were the big things.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually kind of similar. You mentioned that hobby shop that just wasn't necessarily a game store, but still had all those kind of hobby kind of things. We had one very similar to my parents' house. I don't even remember why we were in there, but I saw the Robotech role-playing game.
Oh yeah.
Now, Robotech is literally what I would say is responsible for getting me into gaming, because I fell in love with the show. And I remember in 8th grade, a friend of mine is like, "Oh, you like Robotech? Well, you should check out Battletech." So that's where I first found out about Battletech. But I'd gotten a couple of Robotech role-playing books. I had no idea what I was doing. But yeah, so it was all it all kind of started that same way. So you get into playing, but when did you decide that you wanted to start making your own miniatures? I think I might be jumping
Uh,
ahead, so we'll probably
no,
jump
no,
back, but
you're
we'll go.
you're not jumping as far ahead as you might think. So I had actually for years been not trying to make miniatures, but I wanted to be a comic book artist, but I would always sculpt. I would play with clay and make little figurines, nothing as small as a miniature. But I really enjoyed 3D, and frankly, I was better at it than drawing, especially early on. And I first got interested in the idea once I moved down to Indiana and found the best, most pivotal game store in my life was the Vortex in Logansport, Indiana, run by my really good friend and turned mentor, Greg Faberg. And that it had a couple other things, but it was mainly like a Games Workshop mecca. It just had everything, and the way he stocked it and supported and got everybody into play. It was just amazing. But he is a super talented artist. He can paint, he can sculpt, he can miniatures and illustrations and all this stuff. And he had learned about some of the materials like green stuff and how miniatures were made and had done casting and all this stuff. So I got a chance to kind of see a little bit and learn a little bit about that. And like I said, he's the one that turned me on to green stuff, and that's what was even used. Because before that, I was trying, when I finally got up the gumption to go for it, I just tried to do it in Super Sculpey with no armature either. I wish I had that, but I'm pretty sure I got so frustrated I just threw it away or squished it or something. But yeah, I wanted to make so like I said, I'd gotten into fantasy, and I was like, I want to make my own like character models or something. So I was, or even troopers. So I was trying to sculpt some dwarves to go with my dwarf army, and that would have been, I was thinking about it in high school, but I didn't actually try to do it until college. And then he told me about all the green stuff when he saw that I was actually actively trying it, and that's when I like, oh, I can actually do some stuff with this. And I started making some figures there.
Okay, so you said you started while you were in college. What'd you go to college for?
I went to college to be. I went to oh, I'm trying to decide how much of a story to tell. I went to college to be an artist. For a brief moment, I thought, no, I want to, and for a long time, I wanted to be a teacher as well, an art teacher, because I liked all the teachers that spoken to me. But once I got into those college courses about being a teacher and found out everything that a teacher has to go through, God bless them. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Right.
And I'm like, this isn't for me. So, which is why I do it now the way I do it, because I still have a passion for teaching. I just didn't want to do it in that format. So, but I went to school to be an illustrator. But while my dad has always been deeply involved with computers. He has a software company, and he used to build hardware, and would build hardware for his clients, and we would help him build those. So I've always been just surrounded by computers and had the opportunity to learn a lot of graphic design programs even before college. So when I got to one of those classes, I was like, oh, this is a lot easier for me. I'm already had a leg up on the skills. And so I decided to double major. So I ended up being a graphic designer and an illustrator. And I actually hated all the sculpting classes that we did, because there was a lot of subtractive sculpting or just throwing on a wheel, which is fun, but I wanted to do, figure sculpting, and there wasn't specific classes. I mean, you can always try and do your own thing, but
they don't really teach you how to cater to the nerd crowd.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure I could have probably made it an independent study, but I was still pretty dead set that I was going to be an illustrator, and I was just taking graphic design because I was good at it, and there's a lot more jobs out there. Sure. So that's how that went. So I went to school for that, but in the meantime, my passion for miniatures didn't wane. I was doing a lot of painting and conversions and little sculpting things, and then it was, I think, my junior year, or it might have even been the senior year, like the beginning of the senior years. I had done 2 figures starting that summer before my senior year. And then I got my first gig for Fantasy West. And I was like, oh, wait, I can do this. I want to do this. I can make my own miniatures and people pay me to do it. And that's what I'm going to do.
Who is Fantasy West?
Fantasy West was a little startup by a man named Troy Megley. It was just a guy with a passion for making figurines. His line was going to be more of less of a gaming line. I think he was going to try and do it all, but there was a big focus on what's it called? You know how you would see in those collectible things in the mall where they'll have stained figures with the gems in them, like a wizard. You might see
like the
like
pewter,
tinted.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. He was kind of going for that sort of thing, and he was going to do a big theme on dragons, and so I did that. It was a very hard. He was great to work with. He was so patient and generous. But it was a big project, especially for my first official one. But I did get it done, and I learned a lot. And then, but my first real break in kind of the formal miniature industry, I mean, that was very helpful because it gave me a baseline. I could say I got hired, I did some work. But my real break started with another company with a very similar name called FG Minis. And that was actually a line of miniatures, 54 millimeter miniatures. So this is hilarious. Wow. I'm like, all I wanted to do was little regular miniatures, so I could play with use for my armies.
The Gnome Guard.
And the first job was a big dragon, and then this was 54 millimeter miniatures, all with green stuff, which obviously you can use it, and they sculptors more talented than I have used it for years to make awesome large figures, but it was tough for me. I would much rather use clay for big stuff. Anyways, but FG Minis, Mark Krakow is the man that ran that. I don't know if he still has it or sells it, but he, again, great guy. He has an amazing game store up in South Bend, Indiana. I think it's called Fantasy Games, although he's changed some names. He's got a couple different businesses, but he's a really, really cool guy. So if anybody's up there, stop by and see his game store and say hi. But I got into that, and that was when that kind of started, because until I got that, I didn't have any regular work. Like I did this one, and I was trying to look and see what I could get. And then I had a steady stream of work from him. I probably could have had even more if I was faster, but I was, getting my feet under me. Had just gotten married, had a day job, and was trying to figure out how to fit it all in and work towards living the dream and being a full-time miniature sculptor. So,
all right. So that was about how long ago?
That would have been from 2002 to 2003, 4-ish. Actually,
okay.
Yeah. While you're asking and I'm talking, I'm actually going to pull up, because before I wanted to be an artist. No, I always wanted to be an artist, but I almost went to school to be an accountant because I love spreadsheets that much, and I still do them. So I actually have a spreadsheet that tracks every single figure I ever sculpted, and who I sculpted it for, and what month I sculpted it in the year. So yeah.
Wow.
So my first one was July of 2022. Sorry, 2002. 20 years ago. Yeah, just over 20 years. So I've been sculpting for 20 years. That's crazy. I didn't realize
That's awesome.
Then I did so I was a little goblin guy, and then I did a little dwarf fighter in October of that same year. And those were just for me. This was just me learning. And then I got my first gig, and I write down when I finished them. Now, this first year, I actually can't 100% say what it is, so I just wrote down January 2023. But in my first year as a professional sculptor, that was 2003, and I sculpted 4 miniatures. I sculpted a seahorse dragon, a dwarf, a barbarian, and a sorcerer.
Fantastic. All right, so obviously that was 20 years ago, and so you know, you've let's see when. So I first, well, technically I didn't even know about you from Mercs. I apologize, even though I have the miniatures. So I have Tom Mason stuff,
Oh,
even though I didn't know it was Tom Mason. So, but when that's when I first knew about you. Was that like?
wait, when are you saying you first knew about me because of Mercs?
Well, I first.
That's how
Well,
I remember. That's how we introduced or got introduced. I feel like that's how we got introduced was through Keith. You had met Keith, I think, or maybe it was
right,
Brian.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I'd met Keith and Brian, and that's how we ended up meeting. I'm just saying, like, I had gotten like I think I pre-ordered the
Oh, I
original rule book.
gotcha. I
And so, like,
gotcha.
I've got the CCC miniature
Mm-hmm.
where she's got like the armor off,
Ah, yes, the limited edition.
which I have it somewhere. I don't know where. Not
I still have
assembled,
one,
not painted.
like so many of our miniatures.
So, what year was that?
Okay, well, I can tell you when I sculpted that. Let
Oh,
me
well,
find
there
it.
we've got the spreadsheet open. Let's find out.
Let's find out. That would have been so. I sculpted the first incinerator in July of 2009. When did I do the LE one? That's going to be a little harder for me to find. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I would have sculpted that in November of 2010. So
Okay.
it could have been 2011 or so. I'm sure we
So
met. We probably met at a Gen Con when I was helping at the booth. I think is probably when we met.
I think
Or
so.
maybe, yeah.
Well, the reason I was asking that was like, obviously you'd had some you've obviously been sculpting in the 6 years in between 2003, your first full year, and then 2009 when you did the first incinerator.
Mm-hmm.
So who did you work for in the intervening years?
Yeah, so I worked for a bunch of different companies. I think my next kind of regular gig was again for a guy that just had a game idea for a game. I've seen this a lot over the years where your miniatures you're not playing in their world, they're playing in our world, and they're really this size, and they're like, so if they're playing on your table, that cup is a piece of terrain, but it's really a
Right.
cup. So he had this really cool game called the Grimies, and they were basically these little goblins that would have their weapons and armor would be found stuff. So you had like a guy with a whip, but it was an eyelash, and a guy with a scab shield and a warp mace, stuff like that. So, and yeah, and he's still a really good friend. Again, those aren't available though anymore, although I'm sure he could get them if he really wanted to and put them out. But then shortly after that, I always had the dream of working for Reaper Miniatures, but it took me a while to get in with there. But I ended up getting plugged in with a company called Magnificent Egos. I'm not sure if people remember them. That was a fun little company to work for. They did a lot of miniatures. It was similar to Reaper in some ways, where they were just doing a lot of really cool, interesting role-playing figures, but they made it their point to do kind of unique takes. So you wouldn't just have, a fighter, or I'll just talk about some of the ones I did. The first one I did was I don't remember if he was a full ogre or a half ogre Mexican wrestler. Basically, he had a Mexican wrestling mask on and a spiked cod piece. I think his name was it was Horkia. Yeah, and then like another one I did was a half orc, kind of centurion sort of guy. So he's kind of Roman armor, and so they just tried to kind of do some different combinations that you might normally see and make some interesting characters for people to do. It was actually and they were really good work, regular work, really fun concepts to work from. Jason Engel did a lot of the concept art, which I was a huge fan of his art back then. I was just dying. I would pore over it all the time. And then when I found out that he was like the lead concept artist there, and then I got to work off of his pieces for a lot of the sculpts I did, it was a real treat. Yeah. What else though? But yeah, I want to finish this story. That was a huge thing for me working for them, though. It did a lot of figures, and it really pushed me. I still think, there's things I could do better on them, but wow, it pushed me to do some incredible detail and dynamic stuff with my figures when I worked for them. But the most important part of working for them for me was we used to go to these sculptor hangouts that Sandra Garrity would host, and there would usually be a sponsor. A lot of times it was Reaper. Sometimes they would team up with other people, and one time it was Magnificent Ego and Reaper. And that's one of those shows is when the owner of the company introduced me to Ron Hawkins, and that's how I first got my first connection. And I can look on the spreadsheet. I don't remember when, but it looks like in July of 2007 is when I finished my first Reaper miniature.
And which figure was that?
Well, I call it at least this is at the time when it was given to me. This is the name that I thought it was, but sometimes they change them. So it was for their Warlord line, and it was a dwarf sapper. It's this really cool guy. I don't know. He's kind of just standing there, not doing much, but I gave him a little nice. I still tried to give the pose some movement, and he's just standing there holding this two-handed axe. He's got an interesting helmet with kind of like this domino mask that's attached to it, comes over his eyes. And I ended up doing several different ones, a few conversions based off of that guy, and still one of my favorite figures I've ever sculpted was the dwarf miner sergeant, which goes along with him. Let's see if I can find that.
Hold on a second.
You're looking it up. I have things sorted pretty well in there, so
I think so. Is that it?
Oh, that's it. That's number one. I love that figure. I spent way too much time on it, but I was like, this has got to be amazing. I've got to knock this out of the park. And I love that figure. And so, yeah, there's a sergeant that goes along with it. That is one of my, I like that one a lot. But the sergeant, it was a blast to sculpt. And there he is right next to him. Yep. That guy. So he had a lot of fun, intricate, equipment and stuff. And I'd never done that much detail work before, so it really pushed me. So yeah, but I've worked for a lot of different companies, a few other, smaller ones in that time. I've worked for WizKids, which again was a real treat.
What did you do for WizKids?
Okay, so I started off doing some DC. Was it DC? I think it was all DC stuff. No, I did 2 Marvels and then three DC figures at first. I did Marvel Boy and a Living Lightning, which I'm not sure if those ever came out. I think
this is for HeroClix, correct?
HeroClix. Yeah, sorry. I should clarify that. Yep, HeroClix. But these 3 did. I did Hourman, Time Trapper, and Major Disaster. I'd never heard of, frankly, any of these characters, but
you just threw out some names, and I'll trust you.
Yeah, comic books has a lot of characters, but I did eventually. I'm going to share it because those people don't work there anymore, and they're not even making HeroClix, are they? I don't know.
Actually, they still are.
Okay, well.
I don't know how, but sure, whatever.
But the people I was like over the moon because I was working for WizKids and it felt like, a super big kid company. I will say it wasn't bad to work with, but I much preferred working for Reaper and all these other companies because it was so much more corporate and rigid and whatnot. But those initial ones were great to work with. It was fun. But the figures that I enjoyed doing the most, or that I was most excited about, was also kind of my worst experience because I wanted to do known characters, so I never got to do known superheroes, but I did get to do 2 very important alter egos. I got to do I can't think of the names, a Bruce Wayne and a Clark Kent.
What?
So yeah, I don't know what sets they were for, but they did come out. I actually need to track them down and see. I never bothered getting artist copies. They didn't provide them, and I never tracked them down. But maybe I'll find them in a 50-cent bin somewhere. But this is the story. Now they were simple and easy characters, but when I was working on the project, I was really excited to do it because I'm like, these are more important. But the liaison was like, oh yeah, I just don't have much budget. I don't know. And I later found out he was just talking me down. They had the budget. And because at the time I had given some contacts for some other sculptors, and I knew they were working for it. And I ended up finding out that they got paid double what I did.
Oh, what?
And I was like, oh, well, at least I got to say I sculpted almost Superman and almost Batman. So,
well, I mean, I wouldn't even say almost Superman and almost Batman. I mean, the alter egos are just as important in my eyes. You know, and I mean, I don't get to say I did anything with Batman and Superman, so
yeah. So I do, yeah. So it's nice. It's a personal highlight there.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So one question I did want to ask, especially like early on starting out, how did you even really get in with these companies? I mean, obviously you could, you know, you're going to sculpt, you're going to kind of make a portfolio, but then you still got to get that in to have somebody give you a chance. So
yeah, it's a lot different now. I mean, I'm sure there's similar ways, but what I did two major things. And the number one was, it was the One List sculpting group on Yahoo. Back then, pretty much every sculptor in America, which there wasn't a ton, there's so many sculptors now, it's amazing, was on that list. There was also several of the manufacturers, and then there were a lot of key people that were just really involved in it as a hobby, but like in a really in a way they were really building it up and helping other people learn. So that was the premise, was to learn, but with having actual professionals there and actual professional manufacturers there, you had like a resource like you could not believe. People that were doing it, and they were so willing to share, people sharing articles, answering questions. And then as that grew in notoriety, you would have people come there looking to hire people. And that's how I got my first two jobs, with Fantasy West and then FG Minis. They posted there, and I you know, put together a well-written letter or, you know, response to their call. And that's what did it for me. You know, I had a very limited portfolio. I only had two pieces at first, and then I had that third one with that dragon. But I'll share this, when I got my job with FG Minis, Mark told me the thing that stood out to the most was how professional my email was. I don't know how everybody else responded, but it wasn't as professional. And so that made him feel more comfortable in taking a chance on me. So keep that in mind if anybody's trying to get work. You know, don't forget to be thorough and, you know, read the post and speak to it, and don't be flippant. I saw that a lot when I was working for MegaCon Games with freelancers and things like that. There's one other thing I was going to say. Oh, and then the second part was that took me beyond that were these sculpting meetups. Once again, you had pretty much every or a good chunk of the professional sculptors in America there. Sometimes even foreign ones would come and hang out at this thing, and you had key leaders of companies like Reaper, Magnificent Egos, Jim Ludwig from Dark Sword Miniatures, and others. So you could learn so much, and you actually had a chance to just hang out with these people who might hire you. They could see your work firsthand.
So were these meetups? Was this just kind of like a little miniature convention, I guess we'll call it? Yeah, just
it'd be like they would rent a side room for an evening. That's where the sponsors came in. You know, the companies would help do that, and I think it started out more as a way for the sculptors to all get together and share knowledge and spend time together. But they opened it up to, you know, and it's publicity too, right? They opened it up to the public to just come in and hang out, ask questions, see how the sausage is made, and yeah, it worked for me very well.
All right. Well, fantastic. So, all right. So you started working with some of these other companies with Reaper, which absolutely have to say, love the guys over at Reaper.
Mm-hmm.
Ed is great. Ron is great. I have worked with them in the past. So that's actually really cool to hear that side of the story as well. Just kind of confirms how like some of my interactions with them, and just kind of makes me appreciate that company even more.
Mm-hmm.
But so then you get involved with MegaCon, and I want to kind of focus on that one a little bit, because that is where we met.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I like all the stuff you did. And then also because I know for a while, at least my understanding, that was your full-time job, was working for them.
It was, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so how'd you get involved with these guys?
Okay, well, so Keith Lowe and I actually went to college together. I was 1 year ahead of him, but we were both illustration students, actually both illustration and graphic design students. But we met in cartooning class. So I've just been in love with Keith's art ever since I met him. He's just does such crazy, great, dynamic art.
Very
And
unique style too.
yeah, very unique style, man. If you haven't checked his stuff out now, he's actually he's actually head of the illustration department at the college we went to now,
and a teacher.
Yep, professor there, and he's just continuing to evolve and get better. And it's great to see what he's doing. But anyways, so Keith and I met there, and I just was in love with his art. And I graduated, and then he ended up graduating. And he was, trying to get a job, and he was a graphic designer as well, but he really wanted to do illustration. That was his passion. And so he was putting together his portfolio and pitching to all these places. And he had made he did two things. He did like these sets of like 3 or 4 sci-fi troopers, like different squads, different themes. And then he drew something that I started calling the Merc sculptor, or sorry, the Merc sniper. It was a sniper, and I was like all obsessed with mercenaries all the time. So it didn't matter. He could have been anything. I'm like, he's a mercenary because it makes it cooler. And I was like, I love this. I would love to sculpt this. And so we talked and worked out a deal. And so I ended up doing 2 over the course of 2 years. Very slow. I was working in with my day job and my other sculpting gigs. And I sculpted the sniper. And then a year later, I had sculpted the heavy assault, which he had drawn to go along with that. Once we kind of was like, hey, let's do this. Maybe this could be a thing we could do. And so we had these 2 figures, and we got my friend C. Petri of Fanization Miniatures to rep our line of 2 miniatures at his booth at Gen Con. And I think we sold like 40 of each at that first convention, which isn't a lot of miniatures, but when it was basically word of mouth, there wasn't, I think we advertised or posted about it on the miniatures page. There wasn't a lot of places to talk about it. And we
probably wasn't a huge booth.
Yeah. I think I had like the most basic rudimentary website. And so, yeah, we were like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing. So, that was exciting. So from there, we went ahead and started to sculpt some more. I might blur the story a little bit, but so I might just jump ahead. I think I sculpted 1 or 2 more of those guys, and then at some point, so Keith was working at Brady Games, which makes strategy guides for video games,
right?
And that's where he met Brian Schotten, and Brian is a amazing writer and also huge into board games and miniature games and things like that. And he was seeing what Keith and I were doing, and he was like super enamored with it. And he was like, oh man, it'd be so cool to have a game. And that was always kind of in the back of our mind, Keith and I, but we weren't game designers. Weren't sure how to go about it as much as I would have liked to do it back then. I didn't have it in me. And, so Brian kind of cooked something up, and we went over to his house one day and played the demo. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a really cool game, really neat, really unique. And yeah, so we talked about it for a while, back and forth. And eventually I came to the conclusion, because they were raring and ready to go. They had a little more, they had different life situations than me. Brian was a little older than us, was a little more established. Keith didn't have kids. I had kids and was a single income family. And I didn't feel like I was scared, and I didn't feel like I could dedicate the time, and I didn't want to slow it down. So I said, you know what, guys, and I didn't have any extra capital, and I was worried that I might have to pitch in, and I didn't want to have to do that. So I said, you guys have a vision for this that's far beyond what I feel like I can do. So what I'm willing to do is I will let you buy me out of the miniatures and the concept, my part of it that was between Keith and I coming up with it. And then it's theirs, and they take it from there. And that's what they did. And they continued to hire me to sculpt, which was fine. And that's what I really wanted to do anyways. I wanted to sculpt these figures. So they did that. And over the several years, they kept adding factions. I sculpted some, Bobby Jackson sculpted some, a few other people did. And they grew it, and it was doing very well as a nice skirmish miniatures game. And then they ended up they wanted to work on a fantasy property. Brian and his friend Kenny were very much in the fantasy side of things, and so they developed the board game Myth, brought it to Kickstarter, raised about $1 million, and when that happened, and they had some thoughts in the back of their minds that, like, if they hit a certain number that was way less than that they would all try and go full time or push a lot more into it. And when it got to $1 million, they're like, okay, yep, we're doing it. And over the years, they had kept asking me, Tom, you sure you don't want any more? You sure you don't want to be involved? And I always pushed them back. No, I'll just sculpt. But when that happened, and they were like, hey, we're all doing it full time. We really want you to come join. Not as a partner, just as an employee. And I was like, okay. And so that's how I ended up getting into it. I was working for a puzzle and board game company at the time, which I really loved the people there. But I was really feeling like I wanted to do more of what I truly love. So when that came around in, I think it was 2013, I was like, yeah, I've got to make the leap. I can't keep being scared to do what I really want to do. And so that's how I joined MegaCon Games, and as their miniature director / lead sculptor. So I was sculpting a lot of miniatures and working with all the other sculptors we needed to create all the different sculpts that we needed to for the games.
So so there were, I believe it was 8 factions in Mercs?
There ended up being 10. There ended up being 10. That's right. By the end of it. Yeah. Can I name them all? Should I name them all? I think I can.
The question I had though is how many of those were you responsible for?
Well, responsible for sculpting, I did about half of I've sculpted about half of all the Mercs miniatures. That includes of the 10 factions, I believe I did 5. I did CCC, EU, Chemvar. That's only 3. I thought I did more. Cephadu. There was one more. It'll be funny if anybody watches this, they'll probably know more than we do. I can't remember. Oh, FCC. So there you go. That was 5 of them. And then the other 5 were done by Bobby Jackson, a couple other sculptors that I never got a chance to work with there before I joined. And then James Van Shake did at least 1. And then we did several pieces for the board game, that were kind of technically not factions, but, other pieces and stuff. So yeah, I did all those guys. Still one of my favorites. Oh, I take it back. I think that's Spotter right there. I think I can't remember who did that. Now that I think about it, I didn't sculpt that one though. Who did that? Was that might have been Gene Van Horn? I feel remiss. I have it written down somewhere. You know me, I keep the spreadsheets.
They don't say. not on the whoever bought. I don't even know who bought this. Whoever bought the line has it.
Yeah. Derek and Kirk. They've got Derek the line, and Kirk. So.
Oh, Fifth Angel Studios. That's it.
I'm excited to see them at Adepticon this year. be fun to catch up. So yeah, so I've sculpted about half of the Merc stuff, which was exciting, which was funny because like I had kept up for a while, but then when other people were doing it, I always kind of in the back of my mind, especially when I joined, I'm like, man, I should be the premier Merc sculptor. I can't have people outdoing me, even though GCC, I did them too. I forgot about that. Yeah, GCC, that was a fun faction. Anyways, so yeah. I'm glad. I have sculpted more Mercs miniatures than any other sculptor, so I always have that feather in my cap. And I guess until they start making more, because I've talked with them. I might sculpt some stuff, but I just don't have the capacity to do a bunch of work on it. So.
Okay. So all right. So you're working for MegaCon Games. You do all the miniatures for Mercs. How much of Myth did you sculpt?
I actually did do quite a lot of that. I did a ton of heroes for it. I did the heroes for the 2 big expansions. I can't remember the names of those now, but it was a male and female swashbuckler and all of their leveled up versions, and then a male and female. I can't remember. There was like this creature. I don't remember what it was. Some made up. It wasn't like a typical fantasy race, but it was kind of a cool like darkling thing. They had like neat claws, and so I did those. I did the majority of the creatures for those sets as well. Although another sculptor did a lot of the other big guys that went in it. And there we go. Black Wall Warrens. Shores of Canis. So I did most of the figures for that, and then I did the majority of or a lot of the alternate heroes, as the heroes leveled up into their epic archetypes and things like that. I did a lot of those, and I love those alligators. I only got to do the big one, but I love how the other ones turned out. So
yeah,
good. I did the little guy and the big guy.
I have so many of these. That's what happens when my friends run Kickstarters.
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's hard. It's so hard.
So,
but yeah, I did. That was a nice change, because I had been going so long when I first started at Mercs. Like as soon as I started EU, had to start sculpting EU. I had to kind of get things rolling, and I was just on Mercs forever. And then when I finally got to get off and I was doing fantasy, I'm like, oh, this is so nice. It's just a different mindset. You're not dealing with the sharp edges all the time, and you can like play with organic shapes more. And so then I was doing that for a long time. And I do like sci-fi. I would like to do it again, but I think I do enjoy the sculpting fantasy the most, since I haven't, which might be evidence I haven't gone back to sci-fi too much.
Fair. So you're working for MegaCon, and obviously you've done some fantastic work. Like I said, I have so many of it. I have all the factions because of Recon, and so I have the entire set of all 12 factions. Actually, I don't know if you noticed, there were 12 factions with 10 models each.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, wow, we were both wrong. Well, that makes sense why I thought I did half, because I did 6 of the factions with a couple stragglers. Man, yeah, I'm gonna have to think about what all those were. Yeah.
Or look at the spreadsheet.
Look at the spreadsheet.
No, not right now.
House 9, House 4. Yeah.
So, all right. So, eventually, we're just gonna say that MegaCon came to an end, and
everyone's doing well. We've all moved on to other things. But
yeah, I know. Brian's written a couple of books.
Mm-hmm.
Keith is a teacher. I have no idea what Kenny's doing.
Kenny's living it up.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably. But then you ended up going back to, we'll call it regular people work.
Yep.
And so obviously you've kept sculpting.
Mm-hmm.
When did MegaCon shut down?
Well, I
approximately?
left in 2016. I don't know what the
Okay.
official date is because they were operating for, in a diminished capacity for several years after I left. I can't remember when they sold it. It might have been 2019, 2018, 2019. Things were pretty much, they were just working on fulfilling their obligations
Right.
basically, and not really putting out anything new. They did a little bit after I left. So yeah, probably around then.
So you left in 2016. You're back to working like us regular folk, and but obviously you kept sculpting. So
Hmm.
so about how many miniatures a year would you say you were still putting out? Were you still working with Reaper, other companies?
Oh,
What were you doing?
yeah, I can tell you exactly.
Be-
This
because of
is
the
documented
spreadsheet.
because of the spreadsheet. Um, so I'll just start in 2017 because 2016 is mostly MegaCon stuff. But I was doing stuff for. I mostly was the year after I left. I mostly was just doing things with Fortress Figures for they had started a miniature line called RBG Games, and we're good friends, and I was and they're great to work with because they our relationship was like they wanted certain things sculpted. I like to sculpt, and they gave me a lot of leeway. It was basically they were hiring me to. They gave me the loose concept, do it your way, and that was a great way to kind of get back into things, not have as much stress while having another day job. So I did most of my work was for them and a couple other friends or acquaintances that we had mutual respect for each other's art and things like that. And then I did a few of my own. But that first year after leaving, I actually did 13 figures. And that was for RBG Games, a couple for that's actually the year that I put together my first Kickstarter, my first fantasy Kickstarter, The Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin. So that was very fun to get back into that. I also did some stuff for Studio Dogaby, which is D. Forrest. He has a web comic that I did a little figure for one of his offshoot series. Good friend of mine that we always hang out at Adepticon. So, but so anyways, yeah. So your question was how many miniatures? So that year I did 13, 2018. I actually dropped off a lot, did 8. I was really finding myself in those next couple of years. When I first left, I was like, okay, well, now that I'm not sculpting all the time, I got to make myself sculpt. I might as well do my own line. And that's why I started that up. And then I kind of took a little bit of a break. I did. That's why I sculpted several of I think the first 5 goblins in that year. Did a few more things for RBJ Games, and I actually did a figure for Gloomhaven. Most people don't know that I actually did a couple figures for that game. They're part of the expansions. That one was a little expansion that came out, I think, a year later. The Aether Diviner is what she's called. And then I did this furry Yeti thing that was part of their Kickstarter they did not too long ago. But so I was finding myself during that year, I was doing a lot more miniature painting and just trying not to be stressed out by giving myself deadlines outside of work as well. But then, man, in 2019, I ratcheted up. I ended up doing 23 miniatures in 2019, which is a little over half of my maximum I ever did when I was at MegaCon doing it full time. What did I do that year? Yeah, I did so much work. I did a lot of Reaper stuff. And then the following year, I did 41. That was the year that I did the Goblin Kickstarter. So there was a lot more, but the goblins were easier to sculpt than most of it. But I say that, and that is true, but I took on a ton of work. I did a bunch of work for RBJ and a bunch of work for Reaper and a bunch of work for myself. That was the most productive year I've ever had, I think, in my life. I remember I've never stuck to a schedule so well. I made a hard schedule for myself for the goblins. because I knew as soon as that was done, I had committed to doing a bunch of RBJ stuff, and then I had committed to a bunch of Reaper stuff, and I was like hitting it, boom, 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 boom. And then from there on, I've done a fair amount, but I haven't been as strict with myself.
Fair enough. So about how long would you say it takes you to actually sculpt a miniature?
I'm a lot faster now. Yeah, I used to think. I mean, there's been times where it felt like it was a 40-hour week to sculpt a figure, but realistically, I think I got it down more towards 20 back in the day when I was being a little too finicky or working on something really complicated. But then I got it down to more like 10, maybe 15 on a really long one. Nowadays, though, I can really push it and get it. Like 8 hours would probably be a long thing, and that would usually mean that I'm really futzing around a lot. Mm-hmm. And being very indecisive. The goblins and things like that, if I really stay focused, I can do one in probably 4 hours from scratch. They are a little not small. Just like conversion. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a weird thing too, and I haven't calculated as much, but with digital, before what always made it seem like it took even longer, especially when it was using green stuff and putty, is I was never good at working on many figures at once or sculpting part of it and then sculpting on a different part while that part cures. I would always mess it up and squish it. So I would do my part and I would set it aside and I wouldn't touch it until it was fully cured. And even with a heat lamp, that would take time. So it took me a long time to get those figures done.
Okay. And so let's start branching into looking at there we go, at some of your stuff. All right, so this is 2016 Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin. What is this?
So I had been doing Mercs for so long. I had been doing then Myth, and Myth has a lot of whimsy to it, and I think that's what started to reach out to me. And I what I wanted to do with this, what this is this was me wanting to start to sculpt things more in my style, and the style that I was really starting to enjoy drawing. I grew up, you mentioned Robotech. I loved Robotech. I loved cartoons to death. And as much as I wanted to be a comic artist and tried, to be Jim Lee or Joe Madureira, what I really loved was like the simpler animations. One of my favorite cartoons of all time is the Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, and just the anime of the Grimm's Fairy Tales. And while these aren't exactly that, they start to move in that direction. You've got the Frog Prince, Frog Knight there, and then some of the other characters, a little more simply and stylistically sculpted, kind of like a cartoon. And so I wanted to do something that was a little, my kids were getting of an age too, where they were interested in this stuff, but I was like, oh, it wouldn't be fun if it was something a little more Saturday morning cartoon, less grim dark,
less skulls everywhere.
yeah. So even though they have swords and weapons and they can bonk each other, it looks less threatening, but still fun. So that's what this was all about. It was kind of about me, and I drew, and I think most of these I drew ahead of time as well. So this was kind of the first time that I was really drawing from my concepts. Even when I would come up with something before, I would do it just out of my head or with reference. And so, but I always wanted to be an illustrator, and I've still kept up with drawing. And so drawing these ahead of time and knowing what I want it to look like and trying to translate my drawing style into miniatures, that's what I really wanted to try and accomplish with these.
Okay. So obviously you've got an idea, you've got a concept. Was this just to kind of, how do I want to put it? Just like reignite the passion, or is there a longer term goal with this?
There was, it was reigniting the passion for sure, but I definitely did want to make a game. I've wanted to make a game probably since I played Hero Quest. And it keeps evolving, and from what I've been doing, it actually has evolved. I wanted to, when I first was making this, I had in my mind that I wanted to make some sort of kind of whimsical adventure game, similar to Hero Quest, similar to Warhammer Quest, as far as maybe a dungeon crawl and things like that. But with these troop of lighthearted adventurers and things like that. So that was kind of my original thought. But again, I wasn't designing a game. This was just, I think, what I was imagining in my mind to help spur myself on and give myself inspiration.
Okay. So, all right, let's see now. And actually, one thing I do want to point out. So most of these characters, I'm guessing you did traditional sculpting, green stuff. Exactly.
All except for the frog.
I was going to bring that up. I remember when you were experimenting with digital sculpting, working on Sir Frogsworth. Has that changed how you sculpt your miniatures? Are you trying to move more towards digital, or are you still old school?
No, I am fully digital. I have done a few pieces traditionally in the last couple of years, but it's actually funny you asked that, because I've been on a couple different shows over the last couple of years, and people, even the own show that I was doing with Bill Thornhill and Patrick Keith briefly, they didn't realize that I had been sculpting digital for years. they thought all the goblins, they thought all the gnomes were traditional. But yeah, so I had started to learn some digital while I was at Merck's. I did this castle piece for a board game. No, I never did any of the actual figures. Everything else was the regular miniatures. Those were all traditional, and these were all traditional except for Frogsworth, where I was like, okay. And actually, I'd been doing digital before Frogsworth. A lot of my figures for RBG games, I think all of them actually were digital. And I was like, okay, I need to sculpt something for myself. And the things I was sculpting for them were like little familiar kind of things, little animals. So they weren't as intricate, and I didn't have to, like, the poses were a lot easier to do. So I'm like, I need to do a full figure to get my head around, an entire body and equipment and other stuff. And so that's why I went ahead and did Sir Frogsworth that way instead of traditional like the rest of them were. Actually, real quick tangent. I had actually started Little Knife forever ago. Like, I think I started him before I even went to work for MegaCon Games.
And this is Little Knife, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
He sat half finished in a box for years, and that was actually, I forgot about that. That's why I was like, that was kind of one of the impetuses I wanted. I knew I wanted to make that little character. And I'm like, well, what else could go with him to be like a set? So I finished him and then sculpted all these other guys. Yeah.
Okay. So one question I do want to ask: are Little Knife and Cronin the same person?
Ooh. They aren't intended to be. It's supposed to be this little kid who wants to be a big, strong barbarian like Cronin. So it's supposed to be his hero that he's looking up to. So they're supposed to go. But actually, man, even when you say the adventures of Little Knife and Cronin, you could almost do a flashback thing where he's Little Knife when he's little, and then flash forward. Here he is as Cronin in the future. Man, I like where that's going.
Oh, okay. So they are the same person, though.
No. They were intended to be different people.
Okay,
but I think I like your idea better.
That wasn't an idea. I was just asking. Okay. So
there's nothing written down, so it can be whatever you fancy.
Hey, there is one story written down. We'll get to that in a bit.
Okay.
But well, no, part of the reason that I asked, so this is absolutely a side tangent.
Okay.
So please, slap me if it gets boring. But when I was a kid, I could not care less about He-Man.
I couldn't I couldn't care enough. I loved He-Man.
So no, and that's fine. I'm just saying, for me as a kid, I loved G.I. Joe. Like all of my friends, like everyone else loved Transformers. Fine, whatever. Just give me more G.I. Joes, more G.I. Joes. You know,
G.I. Joe's is pretty much the best.
Oh, it was amazing. But didn't care at all about He-Man. Have you seen the Origins line for He-Man?
Is that what they're just coming out with now?
Right, that's the ones where it's
Does
not
it look like the old style of toys?
Looks like the old stuff, but it's all
Yes.
new. It's all
Yes.
new sculpting. Like instead of 3 points of articulation, it's 18 points of art. Anyways, I have a decent sized collection. I don't have it all.
Really cool.
I don't want it all. They are really cool. I
was actually looking at some of the figures for the Revelation. Is that what it's called? The new series they just did line there. Really cool. Really cool figures.
Yeah. So that line is interesting as well, because if you notice, it's called the Masterverse line, not the Revelation line, meaning they'll take stuff from anywhere, but then that is like full modern, like they're not even trying to, like, they're referencing the original stuff, but they're doing new sculpts, modern looks. So anyways, that's kind of why I was asking if Little Knife and Cronin are supposed to be the same person. Is this a Prince Adam He-Man kind of a thing?
Yeah.
But
wow. Now that I'm looking at it all together, I'm like, that makes so much sense. And I can absolutely see why you would think that, because you have the Swords Girl, who kind of be like a Tila, because she's a little older. She's actually better than Little Knife, but when he becomes Cronin.
Right.
That's so funny. Yeah.
So, anyways, okay. So again, a little bit of a side tangent. That's why I was asking. But this isn't all that you've done with the world, is it?
No, it is not. I shifted gears. Next? So what came next was the Goblin Menace.
You mean these guys?
Yeah, I mean these guys. So after I did after I did what's it called? The Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin, I was like, I need to have some little creatures for them to interact with. So I sculpted 5 of them. They were all sculpted traditionally. Even though I had done Frogsworth digitally, I went back to my roots and did them traditionally. And I sold them as a set at Adepticon actually in 2018. And then I sat on them, I guess, for almost 2 years before I developed line. I always wanted to make the line bigger. And so they were actually originally meant to be, like I said, just minions for the adventurers to deal with. But man, I fell in love with them so much. Actually, they're kind of going to be, if we can jump ahead a little bit, they're what I plan to kind of rest my hat on as far as a more expansive universe. Looking at the universe through the eyes of these goblins rather than through the eyes of heroes.
Interesting.
But back to this set. So 5 of them are done traditionally, plus the hero, this big dude with the cape, and everybody else is digital.
Okay. And all right, so you needed a bad guy for your unit of heroes. Why goblins?
Because goblins are the best. I got it in. I wanted to make my own goblin first of all. So, and I worked on concepts for this. That's one of the reasons it took so long. I just kept working on it, iterating and trying different things. And I wanted that. And that basically I kept trying to dial him down to be cute, but menacing. That's why that's the whole theme, right? They're the Goblin Menace, because and to go into what I was saying before, where I wanted to kind of be like almost like a Saturday morning cartoon. Yeah, they can cause trouble. Yeah, they can make some destruction, but really they're just kind of a nuisance. They're just kind of a menace. They're not murdering people like in D&D or whatever.
They're stealing your chickens.
Yeah, they're stealing chickens and playing tricks on dwarves and tricking hobbits into thinking there's ghosts in the fields, stuff like that. So I just love the idea of this like harmless mischief. So that's what that evolved after I did the first 5. When I did the first 5, I was just thinking dungeon fodder. But as I went on, I'm like, oh, look, these guys are fun. I can have a lot of fun. They have a lot of, they're again, very stylistic. I designed them so they could have a lot of big head, lots of expression, in kind of a small package.
Yeah, that's actually what I was literally just about to say, is that there is a lot of expression. I mean, obviously they don't seem to have at least a visible nose.
Nope.
But you've captured just all of these, kind of a mischievous, fun look to these. And I think for me, I mean, again, for my friends, I like backing their Kickstarters anyways, even if half the time they don't realize that I'm doing it. And full disclosure, this is the one of yours that I didn't back.
Oh, that's right.
But you're like, oh yeah, I am tracking it.
No. And I'm not. And actually, I don't want anybody to back my miniatures, friends or family, especially if they don't want them. I actually don't like it when my family backs it to support me. I don't need the support. I appreciate it, but I don't need that kind of support. I want people to get these miniatures because they enjoy them, and they will at least think about painting them someday.
Tom, I'm a hoarder.
That's right.
Trust me, I want to paint them.
That's right.
Whether I get to it is a separate issue. But anyways, I do. Yeah, I have grand dreams and designs. Whether I get there, that's a separate issue.
We're all in the same boat, man. I understand.
Sorry. Anyways, but the reason I wanted to point that out, this Kickstarter, I think, even grabbed me more than Little Knife and Cronin. Little Knife and Cronin, I think it's a fun concept. They're fun figures. But it is another set of heroes that I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but I can go to Reaper and I can find plenty of heroes. So not to take away from anything that you've done, just saying that.
No, I agree. I mean, there's some pieces in there that stand out a little bit more uniquely, but Little Knife's just a kid with a sword. Cronin is a barbarian. If you like the pose, that's really kind of all he's got going for him.
Right. So this one really was the one that kind of grabbed me the most. I like the look. I like the styling on it. Again, they are fun. I think you've done fantastically at kind of capturing that mischief and that like you said, that harmless menace, for the fact that my brain can't put together what you had said exactly, but close enough. So you did this one 2020, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then a year later, we got the Gnome Guard.
The Gnome Guard,
which you were my first sponsor.
That's right.
I was super excited. I even tried to pay you for the dumb things, but
no.
All right. So you went from Little Knife and Cronin, then you went to the Goblin Menace, and then the gnome. Why gnomes?
Okay, so this is another interesting story. So I did what the reason that I thought of to do this was I think it must have been, it probably was that Christmas of 2020. My wife and I were in Target, and they had this little gnome. It was just a little ball. He didn't have arms or legs. It was a little ball with a beard and a nose and a hat covering his eyes. And I bought it, and I'm like, this is so cute. I love this. And then after that, for the rest of the year, it actually might have even been before then that we got that, but first we just kept seeing these gnomes of this style everywhere. All this decor, home decor, was on pillows. They were making Valentine's gnomes, Thanksgiving gnomes, fall gnomes, 4th of July gnomes. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. And they were all the same way, like just a big beard, a nose, and a hat. And I'm like, this is so cool. I can't believe nobody's made a miniature, and people make gnomes, but nobody's made a miniature kind of in this style. And I loved the look of it. Again, very stylistic and iconic. And so I'm like, it would be nice to have something, another group that could kind of go head to head in an equal footing with the goblins. What if I did gnomes in that style that way? So that's what really prompted me there, seeing that and just being in love with that style. And I'm like, hey, this would be a great set of miniatures.
Okay.
And it does fill out the world. I was able to in my mind fill it out and have them work in that universe still.
Okay, and where do they fit in the universe?
So the way I see these guys is basically, the goblins are coming into town or fields and they're causing trouble and stealing crops or livestock or just causing mischief. And here's the gnomes, they live in those fields or nearby, and they make it their purpose to help the towns and villages, kind of like, I don't want to say, well, I could say house elf, not that they're tied specifically, but it's kind of their purpose in life is to just tend gardens. We have garden gnomes, right? They live in gardens, so that's their thing. They go and help fields, and they try and keep vermin and riffraff out from causing trouble. So that's why they're the gnome guard, because they're going to guard the fields and gardens from the mischievous goblins.
So we're gonna tangent again a little bit. So you clearly have a story for this world. One thing that I always bring up in my videos is when looking at games, there's always that story aspect. If I just wanted a game with mechanics, I could go and play poker or chess or whatever it's just straight mechanics. There's nothing there. Mm-hmm. But like when you look at something like your gnomes and your goblins, there's a story behind it. And in this case, what is the story here? Do you know where it's going, or is it still just like, oh, I want to make gnomes, and so we'll just kind of put something together?
Well, right now I'm kind of just fleshing out the world with different denizens and things like that. As far as the story, I really do envision this based off like Grimm's fairy tale classics. I love the Grimm's fairy tales and how you would just be wandering around the kingdom and you would encounter this thing or that thing and this type of this witch or this gremlin, just doing all these different things. And so where the story really goes in my mind, it's a little less defined. It's a little bit more general and abstract, because what I want to do is I do want to make a game for this that kind of sets up this world. But the point and purpose will be for you to kind of build and experience those sorts of stories while you play them. But again, like I said, through the eyes of the goblins, more than heroes.
So, okay, so I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this question. So when you say from the perspective of the goblins, so do you see it as like we're going to be looking at the goblins causing the mischief, or?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. So basically, to keep it really simple, you would be playing as a group of goblins. Pardon me, got hiccups. As a group of goblins causing mischief. So those would be the kind of scenarios you would do, either encountering some sort of mythological thing, or just if you're playing a game of Necromunda, right? You go head to head and you're attacking some guilders and stealing their stuff. Well, it's that sort of thing, but you would be acting as a tribe of goblins.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean that's another thing that I like what you're doing here is that you're kind of turning a bunch of things on their head. You're still pulling in a lot of traditional things, the heroes and that kind of stuff, but typically we're not seeing it from what I guess I would say the antagonist perspective. Usually it's it's the protagonist perspective. So I think that's really interesting as well. So then I guess next thing we should talk about is the fact that you have another Kickstarter coming up.
That's right. So once again, expanding the world a little more with the Frog Knights. Now I will say this, this actually came about because of a suggestion you made. Obviously I made Sir Frogsworth.
Wait.
What?
Why are you blaming me for this? No. Just kidding.
I remember
Sorry.
when I was at Adepticon 2018 selling my little set of goblins and some other things. You were like, oh, it'd be so cool. I would love to have a set. I think you actually asked for a set of plastic trooper Frog Knights, which would have been awesome. And maybe someday I would love to do a set of plastic someday, but doing what I can.
I don't think I asked for plastic. I know
maybe not. Okay. Maybe that's what went in my head. I would love to do that, but another time. But yeah, so, and it had always been with me. I've always really loved Frogsworth, and I was thinking about, well, maybe do I just want to update him? But as I started to do these sets, like of the goblins and of the gnomes, I was like, well, I could do I could make like this order of knights. Frogsworth is a knight, so there's probably more of them. What would that be like? But I did want to try something a little different with this one. As you can see, these are the 3 archetypes. There's obviously going to be more than this that I'll be showing soon. Kickstarter actually goes up on November 10th. But you've got the main Frog Knight, which is kind of what Sir Frogworth I call them gallants. That's on the left.
Okay.
Yep. So kind of your typical regular knight. In the middle is a croaker, big bullfrog, and then all the way to the right is a tadpoleman.
Okay.
I think I'm very clever with that name.
I didn't catch that one.
Okay. It might be a little too subtle. I have issues with that, but I thought it was funny. So
no, don't apologize. I think that's great. Like, especially when it is subtle and it takes a second for everybody. Oh, wait a second. I think you get that deeper buy-in because they maybe somebody sort of feels like they're hoodwinked a little bit, and then it's like, oh wait, no, I figured it out. No, I think that's a great name. I think awesome. I think you need to stick with that. So okay, so these look like they're all digital sculpts.
They are all digital. There will be no traditionals in this one. Not that anybody. This is actually the first time I've actually shown them as renders. In the past, and this is probably why people thought I was doing traditional. I made it a point to master mold all of them first, get copies, spray them, photograph them. I just had a little bit more of a time crunch, and I got my own digital printer, a 3D printer, I should say, for test printing. And so I've just been kind of embracing the digital side a little more, and not, they're going to be physical. They're going to be physical models, still pewter, just like the previous sets. But yeah, they're all sculpted digitally.
Okay. So then, all right. So you said that I was to blame for this set.
It just stuck with me. It was a great suggestion, and it's been with me ever since then. I'm like, yeah, I should do that someday.
Okay, so all right, so then I don't want to. I'm not trying to toot my own horn because you are the creative one here. But all right, so with the Goblin Menace and the Gnome Guard, we basically got two just we'll call them ranked unit quote unquote factions. How are we going to get the Frog Knights? Are they going to be similar, or did you do something different?
It's going to be a little different. So this time, and with each of these Kickstarters, I've been kind of challenging myself to push myself in little different ways. The goblins and the gnomes were pretty similar, but I had never really done these sets of like mass troops, for lack of a better term. And so that was a good experience. This time I didn't want to do that again. So while there are more, I want to do the variety. That's why I have the 3 different archetypes, because they're all a little different. So what you'll get in the base set is there will be a set of 5 uniquely posed gallants, the typical Frog Knights, with some different weapons. You'll have 3 different croakers. They're big, beefy figures. And then you will get a set of 6 tadpole men, which will have some different weapons there as well. Actually, I don't know how well this will show up, but the tadpole men are actually my homage to my favorite miniature of all time.
Hold on a second, Tom.
Okay.
Let me figure out how to do this. There we go. Haha, look, Tom took over.
So this is one of the henchmen from Advanced Hero Quest. And these came in 3 varieties. You had one with a sword, one with a spear, and one with a halberd. And so I've got my little test prints here I can show off. Whoops. There's this guy, which you just saw on there with the halberd. This guy with either another type of halberd or and I might be saying this wrong, bardiche. That's how I always pronounced it from when I played UO. They used to have a weapon like that. And then the other guy's got a little spear. So these are your rank and file. They're just derpy little guys standing guard, waiting for their chance to be a frog knight, a real frog knight. Oh yeah, these guys actually do have a little tadpole tail on them too.
Nice.
So that's where they're a little different. But they're a little more static, a little more plain and rank and file. But the other ones are all very dynamically sculpted and with different weapons and things like that. So
okay. And so like for the other Kickstarters, you had obviously you could get just like a little sample pack or the full army, which I'm just calling it an army for lack of a better term.
Did you know? I didn't know this until I started researching names for this Kickstarter. Do you know what a group of frogs is called?
An army?
An army.
Oh,
works out.
Okay. So for right now, obviously you don't have a game yet. You just have your miniatures, but this is going to be so you've got a group of individual heroes, you've got goblins, you've got gnomes, you've got your frogs. So what have you been using to play with these miniatures?
What have I been using? I do a lot of Dragon Rampant.
Okay.
I haven't, and Oathmark. I haven't used them in Oathmark, just because for whatever reason I feel like I use the Oathmark miniatures. I absolutely love them, and I know you can use other things, but Dragon Rampant just automatically is a more open game where you can make any rules you want. So that's what I've really been enjoying. I have used them a little bit in my retro dungeon crawl play of Advanced Hero Quest, Hero Quest, and Warhammer Quest when I play that sometimes. So, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So let's see. So you said we're going to get 3 different poses for the croakers.
Mm-hmm.
5 different poses of the gallants.
Gallant. Yeah,
Gallant.
wait, am I saying it wrong? I'm saying Gallant because Craig Gallant's name. Is it pronounced Gallant if
I
it's not
don't.
somebody's last name?
It's English, man.
We can just call them the Frog Knights.
The Frog Knights.
But yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
So
traditional Frog Knights.
the knights, and then the paladins. Maybe no, that
Yes.
doesn't.
Yeah, that could work.
No, I don't think that
No,
works. I like
does.
croakers.
It's too regal. I had somebody suggest paladins, and I was like, I see where they're going with it, but they seem a little too goofy for that.
They're bruisers.
Yeah.
I actually, just to this is kind of a little off question. So the gnomes and the goblins were they on 20 millimeter?
Yep.
Okay.
They were small. No, this is a good thing. Go ahead. I think I know what you're going to ask, but
I was going to say they did seem really small, and I'm guessing the tadpolemen are going to be on on 20 millimeter bases.
They are not. Everything is on 25. These guys, while the tadpolemen aren't the biggest figures, they are bigger than the goblins and the gnomes.
Oh, okay.
And therefore stand in stature a little bit larger. So these figures aren't the tallest, but they're definitely a little bit bigger. They're taller than all those, and they're a little bit bigger and bulkier than that. So again, I'm kind of moving away from doing a bunch of little tiny things, trying to get back up to, more typical
normal
size figure. Yeah. Quit.
Sure.
Not making little cutesy things.
No, that's fine. Okay. So all of them are going to be on 25 millimeter then.
Yep.
Okay. So, and for those of you who aren't into metric, that's about an inch. Okay. So, all right. Now, so this is going to go live next week. And how soon, or how long is the Kickstarter going to run for?
I plan on running it for about 10 days.
Oh, okay. So a short one.
A little shorter. I don't know. I keep, you know what? I might not decide until I pull the trigger. I keep going back and forth. It was originally going to be 2 weeks. I was talking with some people, getting some advice, and I was like, well, maybe. Again, every Kickstarter I've done, I've been trying to do a little bit of an experiment, either with my sculpting or how best to run a Kickstarter. And so I'm thinking, well, I might try a shorter one. I've seen there's some that I follow, a couple of great companies like Midland Miniatures. They typically do 10 days, and it just helps things move along a little faster for everybody. So it will be 10 days or 2 weeks.
Okay. So, all right.
Starting the 10th.
A minimum of a week. To be determined once Tom goes live. Okay, then, and actually I just realized that I should add this to the description. So real quick, for everyone, there will be a link in the descriptions here momentarily to the Frog Knight Kickstarter, so that you can sign up to get a reminder of when it goes live. So there's that. Then I guess the next thing is, what about the older figures? Are they still available?
They are still available. I still have the Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin set. It's actually upgraded. It includes the Owl Blade Master, which was a add-on at the time, but I've made him part of the main core set now. Still got goblins, still have gnomes, and I will be unlocking. There'll be add-ons in the Kickstarter for the gnomes and goblins in the new Kickstarter, just like I did in the past, that will allow you to be able to get some of the extras as well. Came with those sets.
Okay. Let's see. And alternatively, they can just go and order them from your website.
You
also
can.
linked
You
down
just
below.
Can't wait. Thank you.
So you're very welcome. Then okay, so then about how long do you think it's going to take to deliver? Because I'm assuming you have all of your sculpting done.
Yep. So I I put a lot of pressure on my manufacturers last year, and I was able to get everything in hand. I think it was in December. Yeah, it was in December. I'm not going to pressure them quite as much this year. There's a lot going on, and I'm working the schedule, but everything will be should be delivered by February.
Okay, so wow, so within 3 months, that's actually
Yeah, still
like
not super long.
let's be honest, that's basically unheard of as far as Kickstarters are concerned. So sorry. All right, then trying to think of what else I should ask.
We can just talk about fun stuff. We don't have to keep talking about this.
Okay.
I guess this is fun too, but
No,
I'm having a good
it
time
is
catching
really
up because
fun.
I missed you at Adepticon and Gen Con this last year, so it's been really good to
That's
catch up.
that's its own disaster.
Yeah.
Um, no,
Are you going to Adepticon this year?
I don't know.
I am.
Well,
Unless I'm on my deathbed, I'm going. Can't miss another year.
I don't like some of the rules that they had in place last year. And
well, hopefully it'll be lessened since things aren't as severe now. That's my hope as well. So
right, that's kind of what I'm hoping for as well. So we will see. But
all right.
anyways, so but no, I do like talking about this stuff. One thing that I've been trying to do with my Thursday night show is getting like like I've been involved, you know, in so many different areas over the years that I've met sculptors and artists and designers and distributors and just all of that. And so I want to get people on and just talk about what they're doing, being able to show off stuff like this, because I get completely distracted by all sorts of stuff in the gaming industry. So I trust me, I have no problems just showing off your stuff and what's going on, and then obviously we can talk about whatever. So so then let's do that. What do you play when you have a chance to play a game?
I'm getting in a lot of board games recently. Root has been extremely fun. I discovered that at a convention a couple weeks ago. Got a chance to demo it and fell in love and been playing that a lot. But on the miniature side, I am full blown back into BattleTech. Been playing that like crazy. Got to do Alpha Strike for the first time, which is a really great version of an army BattleTech game where you can have a lot of stuff. Simplifies a lot of stuff, of course, but they managed to keep a lot of the things that make BattleTech in there while simplifying it, which I really enjoyed. What else?
I have the rules for Alpha Strike. I just haven't played, which is probably the case for most of my games, but I try to not talk about that part.
Yeah. Well, I would be in the same boat, but I have I'm very fortunate to there's a really great miniature game group that I don't get to go as much as I would like, but they have an incredible, it's like a gaming paradise. They've converted their basement into this just welcoming gaming den. As much terrain as you want, all the miniatures. You don't even have to bring your own miniatures. They've got miniatures if you need them, and they run these big games, and tons of people come all the time. So, got to play in one of the great big Alpha Strike games they were running there.
This is just at somebody's house or at a game store.
Somebody's house. No, somebody's house. The Flying Pirate,
the
Gaming
Flying
Club.
Pirate.
Yep, Louisville. I can't remember what we call it, but that's what that location is called, the Flying Pirate. So, two great guys, Kevin Shope and his brother Brian. They're awesome. Very cool.
Cool.
But yeah,
Yeah,
we
well,
play all sorts of things.
got it. Yeah, you mentioned the basement, and I did have to ask. Because I went up to Utah, and people that are watching this are going to be like, oh my gosh, he's telling that story again. But I went up to Utah and I found this game shop. Okay, so you walk in, ground level, only miniatures. Okay, there's like one like tiny little section behind like the register that has like 8 board games on it. That's it. Other than that, it's miniatures, it's paint, it's terrain, it's everything for miniatures games. There are no aisles in this store. It literally looks like a maze.
Wow, that's cool. That's kind of fun.
First time I go in, like I'm in one spot, my wife is in another spot. She's like, "Oh, check this out." And I'm having to figure out how to get to her. It's a freaking corn maze in the store, but they have all sorts of stuff. They've got Games Workshop, they've got Warlord, they've got Reaper. I think they don't have a lot of Reaper because most of it's aimed towards like war games, but they have historicals and fantasy and science fiction, like just all sorts of stuff. Judge Dredd, crazy. Anyways, but that's when you go in the main floor. You look up, there's a giant, hole in the floor for the next level, okay, which is where the gaming area is. So you've got like basically about 16-ish tables all around this opening in the floor that looks down on the retail section. So you come in, you can still hear all of the noise from all the games, everything that's going on while you're shopping. But it's just all upstairs. Why they did that, I don't know, but it's just kind of fun. But then they also have a basement. You go down in the basement and you can set up like an 8 by 20 table.
Wow.
If you want. They've got plenty of terrain to cover it, and it's absolutely fantastic. I wish I lived nearby so I could just make that my store and go hang out all the time. But then I would have to live in Utah. And I am very comfortable in my rut here in Arizona. So there's that. Okay, so actually that bringing up BattleTech though, that is coming back around. That's kind of an interesting point because you said that was one of the early games that you got that got you into all of this. When did you get back in to BattleTech?
I got back in about the time that I was launching the Gnome Guard Kickstarter. I think I knew that they were kind of bringing it back. I had seen some stuff at Adepticon a few years before, but didn't really. I'm like, I already have it. I've got a bunch of miniatures. I don't need this anymore. I never really looked any closer than that. But my buddy, who I saw just a couple months ago, known him since first grade, one of my best friends. He was telling me they did this Kickstarter, and he went all in on the Clan Invasion Kickstarter and got everything plus more. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these miniatures are amazing. And he showed me how he was painting them because I always hated painting mechanical stuff like that, partly because I was intimidated. But he was showing me how some of the techniques he was using. I'm like, oh, this is so approachable. And so I started collecting some and painting them. And then, we didn't even have to look at the rule. We had to brush up a little bit on some of the finer things, but we could basically just start playing again, just like, because we played it that much. We just knew it all still. And it was great. So yeah, it was a few months after that. But that's when I found out about it and I started getting the figures. And yeah, we just, every time we get together, we play at least one game of BattleTech.
Okay. That actually prompted a question. So I am absolutely in love with the new BattleTech miniatures.
They're incredible.
Yeah. I remember the BattleTech miniatures that I got as a kid. And they are not the BattleTech miniatures that we're getting today.
Absolutely. Like even the metal ones, when they're high quality, I was going back and looking at some. I'm like, oh, I used to think this looks so cool. It looks kind of dorky.
Right?
Just weird little poses or funny stringy arms, and
or it was a Project Phoenix mech. I don't know. Yeah. But that actually, my real question though is, so as a sculptor yourself, okay, obviously you just said that you really like how those miniatures look. How do you approach other people's miniatures?
I love other people's miniatures. I absolutely love them. I have painted one Cronin and one Frogsworth and one little pig miniature I did for RBJ Games, and that's pretty much the only miniatures of my own I've ever painted.
Wow.
Because frankly, I mean, it's not that I used to think it was just getting bored with them, but I think it's really, I just get so excited about other people's miniatures. You know, I'm sculpting them because I love miniatures. So I'm collecting them just as hard as anybody else. And, you know, yeah, I guess after sculpting one for a while, I've kind of poured my creativity into it. And so when it comes time to paint, I'm usually, well, I'll go paint this other thing that I haven't gotten to experience yet. So, you know, I obviously there's some miniatures I like more than others, and those are the ones that I buy and collect. If you were asking more from like a technique side or things that I'm looking for or looking into.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I do prefer, you know, I collect all kinds, but I definitely, and I think it shows in my sculpting, I'm preferring miniatures that have detail, but not too much detail. I'll actually give a comparison. I actually don't enjoy painting as much as I love sculpting my old Mercs miniatures. When I've tried to paint them, I do not enjoy it because there's so much stuff. And like it overloads my brain. I'm like, well, all these things need to be all these different colors, or I need to hide, you know, I can't break them down into simple sections enough. I think I could now, because some of that was just me getting too into the weeds. But I like things that I really love. Some of my favorite miniatures are the old Citadel, what we would call old hammer miniatures, because they just had just enough detail. So you're like, something's going on. This guy's got his spells ingredients in a pouch or a scroll, but he's not like covered with 100 pouches and million belt buckles and dozen different straps and armor plates. And so that's what I tend to look for. And I think that's why I had trouble with painting BattleTech miniatures for a long time, because it looked like there was so much to them. But with the techniques my buddy showed me, I was able to approach it in a much more holistic way, where you kind of just paint the whole thing one color, do some washes for shading, and then you just pop in some accents, rather than, you know, feeling like you have to paint every little thing its proper color and whatnot.
Fair. So then I guess last thing we'll end on, because we've just got a few minutes later, or a few minutes left. Man, it is more than 3 hours of sleep, everybody. So besides yourself, who's your favorite sculptor?
Who is my favorite sculptor?
We're gonna make some enemies now. Why didn't you say me?
Well, the hardest reason, the thing that's hardest for me to pick is like to define one. I will tell you one if I have to only tell one, but I'll tell you others. Is because I'm very a magpie kind of gamer person. You know, I have a lot of interest. So as soon as I start really loving this one artist or game or anything, I'm like, I love this one just as much. So, but Bobby Jackson is one of my favorite sculptors ever. And I think it's funny. It's not funny. It makes sense that a lot of some of the other sculptors that I really enjoy their miniatures of are people that inspired him. People like Mark Copplestone, Bob Naismith, things like that. So, but, and I'd probably pick other ones too, but it would be more of like units in time, like the Perrys. They're amazing sculptors, but what I really love in their work was when they were doing the dwarves for Warhammer a long time ago, because I just love those miniatures. And then Ali Morrison on the Marauder dwarves. Those Marauder dwarves are what made me want to sculpt miniatures.
What are the Marauder dwarves? Was that
so
from Warhammer?
They are from Warhammer. There was a time where they had all these different sculptors, and to try and give the sculptors maybe more of their own purview and style, they brand, like Bob Ali had, I can't remember what it was called. He had a line, but it was all I think it was all technically still Citadel miniatures, but they were under these different branded umbrellas. So you had Bob Ali's, and then you had Marauder, which was Trish and Ali Morrison, things like that. But those are the figures that made me want to be a sculptor. But you know, I could go on forever because there's so many great sculptors out there that I totally admire their work, but maybe they're not the figures that I would like to paint and play with as much, things like that. So, but most of the Reaper, all the Reaper people, because Reaper has amazing sculptors. So,
yeah, they well, and it's especially just like the variety. Like it's funny when I first got into miniatures gaming, like Reaper, like, is gonna sound horrible, but I kind of looked down on it. Yeah, because I got into Warhammer, and it's like, oh well, Reaper, it's just, it's just a whole bunch of random stuff, and I didn't quite put together that, like, especially because they were catering more towards the role playing crowd. You need that variety, and so the fact that if you need a dwarf in a chainmail bikini with a longbow, you can probably find it in Reaper somewhere.
It's a brilliant business model. It was a brilliant business model, and something we all really needed, frankly.
Yeah, and so it has also been interesting to see how my own tastes have changed, over the years, from Games Workshop is great at everything, to nowadays where it's like, okay, yeah, they do great models, but I'd rather get some Goblin Menace or some, I'm trying to who was the Stonehaven?
Oh yeah, that was he does some amazing pieces. I like his work a lot.
Yeah, like, I mean, he was kind of like everywhere. I don't want to say everywhere, but like kind of big for a while. Like, it's like every year, here's a Kickstarter, we're going to do a new batch, and
one of the most prolific people I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and then he just kind of dropped off the face of the earth, it feels like. So
I think he was learning ZBrush, because now he does everything. He's a digital sculptures, which they're all still amazing. And again, he's back up to, like, I'm looking at how many he does. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you sculpt so much of this stuff?
So anyways, but okay, so I have bad news. It is now 9:00. Although you're like, hey,
it doesn't feel
I can go to bed.
To me.
Look, those of us who A, don't do daylight savings time, and B, don't live in the future, it's only 9:00. So okay, so we'll go offline and we'll say our proper goodbyes here in a second. But real quick, besides obviously we talked about your Kickstarter, those are linked down below, but is there anything that you want to shout out, talk about, mention we didn't get to, whatever?
I'll highlight my YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about sculpting and seeing what I'm doing, you can go to search me on YouTube, Tom Mason Sculptor. My main website. Yep.
You should be linked in the description over to there as well.
Cool. Okay.
If not, I'll edit it later.
Yeah, that check out the Kickstarter, which we've been talking about, and is linked down there as well. No, I think that's pretty much everything.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, everybody. I hope you did enjoy it. I don't know if we have any. Actually, I think we have one person watching right now, but regardless, it has been absolutely fantastic to catch up, learn a little bit more about you, and see your great work. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. So, with that, like I said,
great to be here.
As I'm dying here. With that said, we'll say our proper goodbyes offline. But everybody, thank you very much for being here. Make sure you like the video, share it with your friends. Tell everybody nice things, and come back next Thursday when we'll talk to somebody else. So, thanks for watching.
Have a good night, everybody.